Hey, it's Rob Ryan. Welcome back to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. This week's episode is a can't miss. If you are interested or trying to understand the world of storytelling, of branding, of marketing at a world-class level, but broken down and can be applicable to your life as an individual entrepreneur, as an early stage founder, as an investor, as an executive, as a big brand executive, or as an athlete, this is the episode for you. I had an amazing conversation with my friend Peter Abraham from here in LA. Peter is literally a world-class expert in those things I just mentioned, storytelling, branding, and brand marketing. And we dove really specifically into the world of sports and athletics because Peter is renowned for his work in the place, the intersection at which sports and business meet. And in today's world of individual athlete branding, as well as team and league growth, and branding and fan community building, as we see in so many different leagues and in so many different athletic pursuits. Peter wowed us with some stories about people in the running and biking communities, bicycling communities all across the world, across the country. He dropped some dope examples of great branded athletes who are doing storytelling the right way, companies that are branding themselves and building community and creating experiential marketing that connects and creates engagement and loyalty and purchase loyalty and drives revenues. I mean, he really broke it down. It's a masterclass in storytelling, branding, and brand marketing that can be applicable to any discipline. We just happen to look at it through the lens of sport. So it was an honor for me to finally have a chance to have a conversation with Peter here across town, but I know you're going to enjoy it as much as we do. Thank you. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Peter Abraham. Peter is the president of Abraham Content Marketing Studio, one of my favorite social voices on all things sports and sports business, a mutual friend that this is actually the first time we're meeting through our good buddy Yogi Roth, who I talked to yesterday and is very excited to listen to this episode when it eventually comes out. And today we're going to dive in and we're going to explore some of Peter's expertise and also just some of Peter's story. Because as the guy who believes that we need more entrepreneurial thinkers in all sectors and segments of society and industry, I've been fascinated for a while in my head and wanted to get Peter on the show to talk about entrepreneurial thinking in sports and the business of sports. So we're going to dive into that. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about him, right? So he's a seasoned marketing leader, professional storyteller, an athlete, avid athlete, and a great dad based here in Los Angeles. He's got a track record spans Fortune 500 companies, as well as entrepreneurial ventures like Freestyle Studios and the LA Marathon. Peter excels in crafting compelling narratives that drive revenue, brand loyalty, and community growth. His expertise lies in content strategy, video production, and experiential marketing, making him a sought-after mentor, thought leader, writer. Pick your poison on how he wants to share his opinions, but everybody wants to get his opinions. So we're really, really grateful to have him here today. Peter, buddy, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, I guess, this way, right?
Thanks, Rob. I see you on the socials so often. I feel like I already know you in person, but in fact, this is technically the first time we've met in person.
Right. And I think it's funny, if I think all the way back, I mean, the connection through Yogi, that way predates the pandemic. I mean, that's like probably right. 2017, 18, 20, right. maybe even all the way back to like when he was doing his first movie.
Right. And I met Yogi in like 2008, 2009 when I was starting at the LA Marathon and set up a partnership with Pete Carroll, who was at the time the USC football coach. Yogi was working with his foundation. At that point, he had just left coaching. And of course, I hit it off immediately with Yogi. So any friend of Yogi's is a friend of mine.
Right. That's kind of my attitude too is it's hard to not hit it off with Yogi immediately. Right.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. All right. So, hey, we got a lot of ground to cover because I just think it's a fascinating topic, especially nowadays. Right. Like we seem to be living in a sporting kind of explosive sporting moment. Right. Especially obviously on the women's side of a variety of games. But I want to cover as much as we can today. And also I want to make sure we touch on your story because I think you have, from what I've been able to glean from your writings and your various social posts over the years, you have just a fascinating journey across the spectrum of life. And I know you're a proud dad. And so I want to kind of get into as much as we can. But first question is right into the sports world. So you tell us, right, how has kind of this concept, entrepreneurial thinking, or more taking a more entrepreneurial approach to things. How has that transformed the sports industry in, say, the last 10 or 20 years?
Well, I think there are a number of ways. If I step back, what is for me interesting about sports is the transformational power of sports. So, particularly if you're participating in them, or there are many ways you can be inspired by sports. Sports can raise money for various things. There are many ways that sports can be an inspiring influence. And I think sports also reflect larger cultural and societal trends, like you mentioned, women's sports. Like, I believe diversity and inclusion is among the most important cultural trends around the world right now, probably along with maybe climate change. And it affects everything from sports to music to politics to everything.
Yeah.
So I personally am, I'm just cut out for entrepreneurship and smaller organizations, and I love building things. So that aligns with entrepreneurship. One of the things I was thinking about last week is I don't really thrive in like large companies. Like
Yeah.
that's not my jam. Some people are great at that. I'm not.
Yep.
So for me, entrepreneurship in sports is very personal. That's like what attracts me to it. There are many ways, I mentor dozens and dozens of young professional athletes. And what I talk to them about is participant sports like cycling or running. I'm like, you guys are like entrepreneurs. You're like a startup company and you need marketing help. You need coaching help. You need probably finance, maybe legal, and you're like the CEO of your own business. So let's start with like the athletes are like the CEOs of their own business. So that alone is like an entrepreneurial element that I think is really interesting.
And that wasn't necessarily present, say, 20 years ago, or it was just less present.
Probably was, but it was less present because now you have the kind of element of influencing online, Instagram, creating your own brand as an athlete in kind of alongside your identity as an actual athlete. 30, 40, 50 years ago, like you were an athlete on a team, that was it. There was no creating content. There was no, writing blog posts. That stuff wasn't part of your ecosystem. Now it is a huge part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. You have you segued right into the next question I wanted us to pull apart a little bit is, right, so you have experience across the spectrum, and you've worked with as clients or in support of projects, huge companies. You understand how they fit, why they play in different spaces, but you have a particular, I don't know if it's expertise or just levels of experience with what I used to call, and you can tell me, I think you call them something different based on what you just said. I used to call them Olympic sports, right? So you have this particular affinity for and connection to things like running, cycling. I saw you over the weekend, you were at UCLA at a track and field match, which apparently not enough other people were at watching because you lamented the missed opportunity for the fans, right? So I'm curious, like in these sports, I think you called them participatory sports.
Yes.
In these sports that are maybe less media popular,
yes.
Right? Do you find, okay, so now we agree that it's happened, right? So more of these athletes have taken on this responsibility of building up their business around their personal brand. Do you find that's almost a requirement? Like is it, and I don't know at all anything about how the financial models of these sports, but like, do these athletes have to become more entrepreneurial because that's like, they're either going to make a living or not?
Yeah. So there's two parts to your question. The participation sports, yes, I just personally am cut out for those. I grew up skiing, mountain climbing, surfing. Like I just personally am cut out for those outdoor participation sports. And I think when you step back and you look at those sports, even as businesses and Olympic sports versus football, baseball, soccer, basketball, those other sports like, NFL, NBA, that's really entertainment for most of the fans.
Right.
Most of those fans are not actually, like if you and I go to a football game, if you go to an Arizona State game, you don't actually play football every
right.
week, okay?
Right.
So it's really sports as entertainment. Whereas there is entertainment in these other sports like running and cycling, but a lot of the people also participate in those sports. So I find that is fundamentally a difference. So yes, content creation for the athletes and sort of building a brand is important, but it's changing. When I first started advising athletes like which was around 2011. At that point, building your brand as an athlete was pretty much Twitter. That was sort of it, literally.
Okay.
Like
Interesting.
Instagram hadn't really launched yet, nor gotten big. Facebook hadn't arrived on mobile yet. And so at that point, there were maybe blogs and Twitter, and there was a sense of kind of optimism, like, yeah, sort of naive, like, yeah, you guys build your brands, become your own, your own head of marketing, build your own content. Well, since then, like 13 years now, a lot has changed. And I still work with even some of those exact same athletes, like Steph Rothstein on the Hoka NAZ Elite team. I'm on the board of directors of Hoka NAZ Elite.
Yeah.
So I've been working with their athletes now for over 10 years.
Okay.
And then I mentor a lot of young professional cyclists. And what I see, here's what's happened since 2011. There's been a proliferation of digital and social media channels, right? So, I mean, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, blogs, now Threads, Twitter. I mean, there's there's so many channels, number one, not to mention YouTube and TikTok, of course, on the video side.
Right.
At the same time, sports have also gotten a lot more competitive. I mean, across the board, they're a lot more, partly because the nuts and bolts and X's and O's of coaching, what you need to do to get good at your craft, the main kind of building blocks, no matter what sport you're in, those are available everywhere online to everyone. You don't need to coach who's got a secret.
Right.
And I just had a really good talk about this at the track meet you mentioned on Friday night with Diljit Taylor, who's one of the preeminent track and field coaches in the United States. She's the coach of the BYU women's team and an incredible coach. And she was reinforcing this idea to me that all the basics, the X's and O's of coaching are all available to everyone online. So what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is now communications and EQ skills.
Okay.
Okay. However, for athletes, like so many athletes are so much faster now in every category, cycling, running, you name it, they're better soccer players, etc. So there's more information on nutrition and mental health and all these things. So the job of being a really good professional athlete has become way more in depth. There's more information available and it takes more time. So you have less time available as an athlete to like create content and have a YouTube channel and all that. It's just not really realistic. And at the same time, there's so many digital channels and social media channels. How are you supposed to cover even half of those as an athlete content? You can't.
As well as like do them well, like create compelling content that differentiates you from all the other stuff that's out there.
So you either need, like, if you're part of a team, like a professional running team or a cycling team, it becomes incumbent on the team to bring in videographers and photographers and stuff to shoot photos and make content of you. So you don't have to actually physically do all that. Or if you're, I don't know, maybe you're on the, an NFL team or a soccer team, if you're making good money, you can hire your own person. Like I heard an interview today with the personal photographer of Tadej Pogacar, who's winning the Giro d'Italia. He's won the Tour de France twice. I would call him the world's greatest professional cyclist.
Okay.
He's only 26 years old. I think he's from Slovenia. He has had for 4 years or 5 years his own personal photographer who travels with him to all the big events.
So he got it. Like he knew.
Right. But he hasn't had to do it himself. He hires a guy.
Right. But he knew he had to be doing it as part of your thesis. Like he had to be doing this.
Correct. But he knew he also had to have somebody who he could pay to do that because he can't do it. So, and a lot of younger athletes, or depending on the sport you're in, there's no budget to like pay a personal content creator. So anyway, that's where we're at.
It's amazing. You said something in there. I don't think I'd ever really framed it this way in my head. Right. So one of the unique opportunities, I guess, is that for these individual sport athletes, or these Olympic sport athletes, the fan base, or the fans that show up in the stands, or the fans that watch them online or in their events, are most likely like people who participate in that sport, right? Like even if it's just weekend warrior level, right? Like that's, and so the opportunity to build community is probably, I mean, it seems more natural, right? Because
Correct.
you're not just trying to appeal to the masses. But
Yes.
I also would imagine it presents, again, like you better be the stuff you create better be pretty authentic,
That's right.
because your audience is
Yeah.
is people who know you can't bullshit them,
They'll bust you if you're not
right?
good. Correct. Exactly.
So double-edged sword, like great opportunity to more naturally build audience because you have kind of your baked in tribe.
Yes.
But also more difficult, so you have to create. That's fascinating. All right, so let's talk about you a little bit, because you fit that. I mean, you're a professional in the storytelling side of this world as well, but you fit the world of being a fan, and being a participant. And it just so happens you've been doing it so long at such a high level. You either work with or you're friends with some of the people that you're fans of, right? Which is pretty cool. But so take us all the way back. Like you're an LA guy. You went to college here, but you've lived abroad. You lived,
like when I grew up, Rob, skiing was like religion in our family. Like my dad is from Vermont, and he grew up skiing starting in the 1940s in Vermont. He claims to have had one of the first pair of alpine skis in the state of Vermont.
Wow.
And, like in Steuart, Vermont. And so we skied our whole life growing up. And then when we were my brother and I were in high school, my parents were divorced. My dad is a math professor. He had a sabbatical year, and my brother and my dad and I moved to Chamonix, France for a school year, and went to school in Chamonix, France, which you may know is like the global epicenter of mountain sports. So
I know it's that because of you, because of following you and listening and learning from all the stories you share.
It's literally where mountain climbing was invented. It's where professional mountain guiding was invented. It's where extreme skiing was invented. Like all these things started there and still thrive there. And now it's become a hub for trail running and paragliding. And I was just there in the fall, and it still has that same energy, which is unique. There's nothing like it. So that really was like a life-changing experience for me, parachuting into another country, learning the language, doing the outdoor sports with my French friends. Like all that was amazing.
In high school?
That was in high school when I was 16 years old.
So, I mean, you did the thing that some American kids will do, the study abroad thing in college. You did it in high school.
I did it in high school. And then I went to UC Davis for college so I could be on the ski team there and on the cycling team. So I was doing two sports there at UC Davis that were both important to me. And I will say, I was never a great athlete. I was always an average athlete who did pretty well because he was really enthusiastic and passionate about these things and loved being outdoors. I'm not personally a great athlete. I still compete in bike races and stuff. I do okay. I'm not like winning anything. Just I want to be clear. And then I discovered filmmaking in college and transferred to UCLA because I had to be near Hollywood, and then embarked on, 20 years in the film business, producing television commercials and some documentary films and some sports films because I really love the sports thing. So I produced some documentaries about sports films, and in there somewhere, I decided I wanted to produce a running event. So I created and built the Santa Monica Classic, a running event in Santa Monica that benefited Heal the Bay. I then sold it to the LA Marathon and became the head of marketing at the LA Marathon when it was just rebuilding from the ashes like 15 years ago. And we built it in 2 years, bigger than it had ever been, with more sponsorship than it had ever had. And we built that around, and I was working very closely in partnership with the president, Russ Pillar, who's still a very close friend of mine, rebuilt that event around the idea of, purpose and mission. Like we had a mission statement that we're about inspiring athletes and connecting communities. And we repeated that over and over and over in every meeting with a potential new sponsor, with the mayor of Beverly Hills, the mayor of Santa Monica. We would reinforce that we're here to make LA a better place. Do you want to get on board with that or not?
And that legacy has lived on beyond your tenure there, because I mean, I'm not a marathon guy, but I can tell you, I live in the neighborhood in dead central Hollywood. And so I've lived there now 4 years, and at Marathon Day, I will walk down to the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and Orange, which is a turning point in the race. Yes. and just like cheer people on, and the spirit and the sense of people kind of coming to that from all the different, from West Hollywood, is really, really special.
Correct.
And you guys set that up. That's awesome. I have a question. You alluded to something. Was there anything to do with your athletic pursuits and your sporting love, your love for sport, the sporting life, that inspired you to pursue film, or was the pursuit of film just completely independent of that creatively?
totally independent of that.
Okay. But then you circled back and you did start producing
And then I
some films around sport.
connected it. Correct.
Okay.
But I still love the storytelling process. And it was really exciting. Like 80s, 90s, early 2000s in Hollywood was really exciting. Those businesses were booming. Being on a big Hollywood film set is really cool with,
It is
a
pretty neat.
crew of
Yeah.
100 people trying to tell stories and stuntman and like that kind of stuff that's fun to do,
There's no question. You probably saw me write about it not long ago, but my daughter's an aspiring writer in Hollywood and television. And for all my love of television and movie from like my childhood forward, I had never actually been on the set to watch a live taping of a TV show. And so I got to do that when she was working on season 2 of Lopez v. Lopez, the new reboot George Lopez show.
Yeah.
And myself and her now fiance Henry and I got to go to the first episode, and it was for me just the fascinated by like the business part of it and all the people and all the talent and all the moving parts and it was pretty cool. That's as you say, it's a unique experience. You made it obvious in the opening when I shared your bio, right? That corporate life is not your thing, right? And big companies, like it took me a couple of big companies in my mid-20s, the beginning of my career, to figure out like, okay, I think I'm better doing my own thing and trying to sell to those big companies, but not maybe work for them. So as you built your creative career, what eventually inspired you? Was there like a catalytic event or just kind of a natural transition that eventually said, all right, I'm gonna launch my own studio?
I think there have been a series of things along the way, crossroads you get to, signposts you see in your career, depending on where you are and what's going on in your life. One was, creating the Santa Monica Classic running event. Well, I needed my own studio to do that. Then after that, Red Bull and Nike, whom I had brought in as sponsors, they wanted to hire me to do marketing campaigns outside of the running event for them. So I kind of kept my studio going and then ended up doing a lot of work for Nike, which was really educational. I learned so much working there. Then, when I would come and go out of a full-time role, I'd kind of resurrect my content marketing studio projects. And then I left my last sort of full-time role in 2015-ish, I think. And then I didn't know what was next, but I just went, yeah, I think it's time to do my own thing for a while. That I had been, sort of on and off working with other businesses at that point for maybe 15 years. And so I needed to kind of do my own thing. And so all this is a journey, Rob. We're on our own we're all on our own voyage and we're learning as we go. And what we thought a year ago is maybe different than what we do now. And
right. That's true.
So
that is 100% true. I want to go a little bit further on this, on your professional side of your life. Storytelling, right? It's a word that you and I are old enough to know that I don't even know that it was a word that we used to describe anything other than like someone who wrote a children's book or something, right? But it is a part of kind of all of our cultural ethos now, and it is obviously a fundamental part of business and creativity, the kind of the creative world. But talk to us in this world where we are kind of torn between, there are still traditional media channels, traditional media outlets, things that can be produced for those pathways. But there's also all these digital platforms that you named in the beginning. Do you approach, or how do you approach storytelling differently in those platforms?
It depends. I always take often if my client is trying to do something, I always start by like, what problem are you trying to solve before I get to channels? So I believe like when it comes to like brand strategy and marketing, there's 4 basic levels. Okay. Level 1 is the foundation. Do you have a purpose as a brand, an organization? Do you stand for something? What is your mission? Okay. Because that is what is going to come through in any content or marketing you do. You need to be communicating an idea. What's the idea? Okay. Number 2, you got to have a strategy. Like, okay, based on that, what we stand for, we're going to really focus on video storytelling this year, let's say, or whatever it is. Okay. The next level in the pyramid on top of that is a tactical execution plan. You got to have, like, what's the budget, the staffing, the communications calendar, like can we create a marketing plan? And at the top level, the top of the pyramid is actually creating the content, whether it's a website or photography or video. And it's got to be good, because you can do everything right up to there and then hire a shitty photographer and it looks bad, and then the whole thing falls apart. So you really have to execute on all four of those levels to do good marketing. So I always like start with like, what problem are we trying to solve? Okay, let's make sure we have the foundation and the house built the right way. Otherwise, you're trying to put a roof on the house before you've built a foundation, and that's always a problem. So that's kind of the how I go in. And then from the customer side, like whatever you're creating, it's got to be good. Okay, whether it's photography or you're making a video, like you need good craftspeople who can really make high quality stuff. And what I see now is a lot of cheaping out on like not hiring really skilled craftspeople.
Okay.
I see a lot of like mediocre content being created for Instagram, and like it's okay. Is it inspiring? It's definitely not. And so
Okay.
I think really good craftspeople are sometimes not valued like they should be.
Yeah, that seems to be a universal truth, no matter what era we're in, right? It's interesting though, right? Because so I'm curious, we're stuck, not you and I, but like the world is stuck in between this. So we've got now college athletes. You and I are both huge college sports fans,
Yes.
college football fans, right? So you've now got college athletes that have this NIL, name, image, and likeness resources and money available to them, which, by the way, just to be clear, I think is awesome. I think the way it's being handled and processed is all terribly broken and a mess. But like the idea of empowering the kids whose universities and industries have been making billions off them is a great idea. So you've got kids who, I mean, like part of it is it almost sounds funny to say they're kids, right? Because they are young kids, but some of them have immense resources. And so even in those circumstances, if their NIL contracts were big enough, their sponsor opportunities were large enough, and they were going to create content for their community or their audiences or their brand partners, they should hire quality people around them, and they probably could. But then there's a whole other sector of kids who are getting much lesser resources in the NIL world, and they're just kids still. So they're just posting to like Instagram and TikTok themselves, right?
Correct.
How do we bridge that, or do we ever?
More power to them. If they can like make some money and get in on that deal, that's great. I'm fully supportive. I would say that I think it's unlikely that most of that is going to be high quality from like a content or marketing point of view. Like you said, they're kids, they're busy being students, number one, athletes, number two. So the NIL kind of video marketing thing, whatever they're doing, is like number three, and they're 19 years old. They're not good at it to start with, even if they were full time. So
and they're supposedly students.
correct. So let's be realistic in our expectations.
That makes sense. All right. So from your cycling, mountain biking, track world, I mean, you're really a cycling guy. Like, are there a couple examples? They'll be new to me, so this will be exciting. But maybe there'll be some that people will know and recognize. But are there some either individual athletes or teams, clubs that are just not only like successful, but they're killing it in the storytelling game?
I think in cycling where you're seeing it is amongst gravel athletes. Gravel as a phenomenon, gravel racing is something really that's new in the last like 7 or 8 years, and has exploded in the way that trail running has maybe exploded on the running side. There's a couple reasons why. Number one, you're riding on, so just to be clear, gravel riding is like, looks like a road bike with drop bars, but bigger tires. But otherwise it looks like a road bike. So you're like, think about it like riding on dirt roads. It's not mountain biking on trails in the mountains. It's really like dirt roads. Okay. So it's a pretty new phenomenon for a few reasons. Number one, is safer than riding on the road. You don't have to deal with cars generally, or not much. Number two, community is a huge part of it. Like these gravel races are huge community gatherings. Community is just so important. And number three, like works for I would say, current cultural theme that is popular of adventure. Like it really fits into the adventure category. So it's become wildly popular almost overnight. These events have thousands of athletes, and there's a whole level of professional gravel racers.
Wow.
Maybe they're making 20 to 100 grand a year, a few more than that, but
Okay.
there's a level that are like privateers, right? Solopreneurs in the bike space. Whereas like when you get to the really top end of professional road cycling in Europe and you're in the Tour de France, like you're on a team. Okay. It's sort of like being on an NFL team or something.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They handle a lot of the sponsorship and the coaching, and gravel racers are all like one-off privateers. They handle their sponsorship, they handle their content creation. And so there are some people there who really have interesting identities. I would say one person to look at would be Sarah Sturmey. She lives in Durango, Colorado. She's super creative. She's like a graphic designer. She's just a really interesting person. And there are a bunch of interesting people that ride gravel. There's an artist named Lisa Congdon who rides gravel races, who's an internationally known kind of pop artist with like bright colors. Congdon. She's a really interesting person. And there are other people that have just done a great job, like creating video, like Ted King would be one. He's I am Ted King on Instagram. He has done a great job. Like he has his own brand of like a nutrition brand because he's from New England. So his nutrition brand is called Untapped Maple. It's like maple syrup based
Nice. That's pretty.
nutrition products for athletes,
That's pretty clever.
right? Which is clever. And he's a bike racer formerly in the Tour de France in Europe, but now he's really built a whole kind of career around gravel. So there's a very entrepreneurial
Yeah.
guy.
Boy, I'm listening and I'm ahead of you. I'm like like as if like either mountain biking or street riding wasn't hard enough. It's like some of these people just said like, let's create a whole new way to do this.
Yeah. And there's another thing, Rob, which is gravel is really welcoming of all, particularly women, which like road riding traditionally has
Okay.
been like you show up to a big group road ride with 100 people, and like 80% of the people are like 40-year-old white males. Like it's
Okay.
just so like white male bro culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just personally am so tired of that. So I do a lot of work in
we
person.
grew up. We're white males. We used to be like we grew up with enough of that. We know what that
I
world.
am a
Yeah.
middle-aged white male.
Exactly.
I
I know what we think.
care.
I want to see what other people think. I say that
And
all the time.
the gravel races have been particularly welcoming to women in particular. And increasingly, you're seeing more communities of color come in. SBT Gravel in Colorado, I want to call out for being the most diverse gravel racing event. And they fly around the country. The owner, Amy Charity, literally flies around the country. I've gone with her to do like fundraising rides for communities of color and get
That's
them interested
incredible.
in riding gravel. I bring communities of color to her event, and there are some really interesting communities in that space. Cyclists of color. There's a club in Philadelphia called Kings Ride Together, and then there's a women's part of it called Queens Ride Together. They have like 400 people,
Wow.
a whole apparel section on their website. Karan Swint, the guy who founded and runs the club, flies around to events all over. He brings dozens and dozens of cyclists with him. And those cyclists, a lot of them got on bikes over the pandemic, really. They're really new to bikes, but they're so passionate about it. And communities of color, I love going to these events with Black cyclists. They bring a whole different point of view on
Right.
what is traditionally a very white sport. And it's
Inevitably.
so refreshing and fantastic and inspiring to see like a different point of view on that sport. In the same way, African Americans brought a different point of view to jazz music, to
Right.
NBA basketball.
Absolutely.
You name it, you name the sport, to running or the cultural thing. It's so inspiring for me personally. And so I spend a lot of time trying to make bikes and cycling more diverse because it's better for everyone when it is.
So true. If I am I remembering correctly, you did a story or you were involved with a story about an HBCU
Yes.
that had built, and I think maybe it was around that same time frame, like
Correct.
since the pandemic, that had built a bicycling team.
Yes. So right after the George Floyd tragedy in 2020, I had gotten wind they were thinking about starting an HBCU cycling team at St. Augustine's University in Raleigh, North Carolina. So George Floyd happened. My clients at the time, going back years, is Canyon Bicycles, the largest direct-to-consumer bike brand in the world. I called them. I'm like, you guys should sponsor this team. I helped craft their whole kind of racial justice kind of response.
Okay.
my action plan for them, that was part of it. And then they hired me to make a bunch of films about the teams. I spent a year going back and forth to Raleigh, North Carolina, making video content about the team and photography. And I became very close to a bunch of their riders and the coach of the team. I'm still friends with a lot of them. And it was really amazing for me as a middle-aged white guy to go to an HBCU and
Yeah.
sit on a campus where you can basically, as far as you look, you can't see another white person.
Yeah.
And I really got to spend a lot of time with the students, asking them about their experiences growing up and their experiences with racism in their own lives. What I found was the kids who grew up in like maybe New York City or I don't know, in the Caribbean, it wasn't such a huge issue. But the kids who grew up in like Florida in the South and like
Yeah.
Alabama and North Carolina, let me tell you, they had seen some absolutely terrible, heartbreaking examples of racism in their own
Yeah.
lives. That was really sobering for me just to listen to in person, 3 feet away, eye to eye
No. Yeah.
stories. So I learned a lot. It was an incredible learning experience for me.
As we always say, right? It's the online world is so toxic and so almost inverted, right? It's very difficult to hate when you're sitting directly in front of somebody,
Right.
right?
Right. I think you're bringing
It's
up a good point, Rob, which is, one of the things I've learned with bikes are such incredible cultural bridges with people. So now I have friends in the LGBTQ community, trans friends, Black friends, women,
yeah.
all these people I've met through bikes because my philosophy is that if you like bikes, like if you really like bikes, like I really like bikes,
You do.
you like them for a few reasons. Like you like endorphins because fitness is involved. Okay. You like adrenaline because they can be a little bit fast and a little bit scary. Okay. You probably like gear because that's an important part of cycling compared to running is gear.
Yeah.
And then you probably like community because community is very central to riding bikes. Coffee after the ride, riding in groups.
Right.
So because of those four personality traits, when you meet somebody else that really loves bikes, even if they're different age, different sex, different,
Right.
it's like a dating app match. Like you already like a lot of the same things. Your personalities are already cut out to be friends. So it's a very easy, connection with
That's
somebody else
amazing.
who already likes bikes. So bikes have connected me to all of these different communities. And I've never had more friends that look different from me than I do right now because of bikes.
That's incredible. What a gift.
Oh, it's such a gift.
Right, that bicycling is given to you, and then what a gift then you in turn by just being who you are and as authentic and
Yes.
humble and open minded as you are, that then you wind up giving back to these communities who otherwise maybe hadn't had that same level of exposure to bicycling or to
Yes.
bikes, and yet then once they do, they now we wind up with those king and queen clubs in New York or in Philadelphia, right? With
Yeah.
400 riders on the. Are there? I'm just curious. I wasn't going to ask this, but now I'm curious. Are there any of those types of groups? I think you've told a couple of stories about running groups before, but is there any of that around cycling, like here in LA? Are there any of those types of clubs or communities?
Yeah, not so. I mean, there's the Legion of Los Angeles cycling team founded by Justin Williams, who lives here near me in LA. So that is a Black-owned professional cycling team that races in a lot of the big domestic, not in Europe, but domestic criteriums and domestic races. So that is, and he's like, he's been on the cover of Bicycling Magazine. He's a Red Bull sponsored athlete. So he's very influential in that community. You have Rasan Bahati, who lives here in LA, who was previously a national champion bike racer, but now has a foundation, works with many different brands, and is really a leader in getting young kids on bikes and getting people of color on bikes. Those kind of clubs are, I think, more popular on the East Coast. There's Black Watts outside of New York City and New Jersey. There's KRT, QRT in Philadelphia, and some others in Atlanta that in Miami that are maybe, here cycling is so, I think they're just all different, races here.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
And we have a wildly diverse population in general. So like
correct.
it's
And like
yeah,
I will say that like I go on different group rides around LA. Like Saturday or Sunday, there's usually a big group. You show up, it's all different people. Like
yeah,
the Montrose ride, which starts and ends in South Pasadena, is so interesting. Like you're on this ride. I love my multicultural LA bike community. Like
That's awesome.
the last time I went on that ride, there's a group over there speaking Chinese in the peloton.
That's
Riding like 50
right.
miles an hour, they're speaking Chinese. There's a group over here speaking Spanish.
Right.
There's women. There's
Yeah.
people who are black. Like this is all in one group of 100 that's roaring along at 30 miles an hour. It's like I love this. This is fantastic.
And like just flying through Pasadena, right? Like with all of what Pasadena brings and bears to the discussion.
Correct.
That's amazing. You touched on something earlier. I've got two last questions before we kind of get to the last segment, but these are two things that you've talked about in your stories and online for the last couple of years, and I've always been fascinated by both of them. So I want to see if you can help us understand. And one is you talked about your friends at Nike, right? So you've talked about the long-standing great relationship you've had with them professionally, and Nike is just omnipresent, right, in the world of sports and apparel and all the weekend warrior life. But you also have recently written pretty extensively about when you go to some of these events, and whether it be gravel racing or running or different things, you see these smaller brands, right? You see these kind of upstart or used to be upstart, maybe now they're more mainstream brands that are just doing a better job at building community or doing a better job at supporting the athletes. So, I mean, to me, that's the ultimate entrepreneurial sandbox, right? Is that here's a brand which has its own amazing entrepreneurial story. It's just really old now. And then it's getting in, it sounded like, as a reader of some of what you've shared, like they're losing ground, or they're getting beat out by some of these different brands who are just more natively kind of on the ground, connected to their audience, connected to their riders or their runners. Talk about that phenomenon a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, well, I mean, all these brands go through different life cycles. I've also for the last 10 years worked with Hoka. My time with Nike sort of ended maybe 10 years ago. And then I started working with Hoka because I was on the board of Hoka NAZ Elite, one of the nation's largest professional running teams. I'm still on the board. I was watching them at the track meet on Friday night here in LA. So I've really watched Hoka's growth. Like in 15 years, they've gone from 0 to over $1 billion in sales. They've done an incredible job. So it's a good comparison to Nike, because I was back at the Olympic Trials Marathon with the team in early February. Hoka, Hoka had just taken over all the experiential activation in Orlando. Like it felt like Hoka owned the city.
That's how I felt reading your writing about it at the time. I was like, wow, that's crazy.
It was like, I was like, God, 10 years ago, this would have been Nike. And Nike was absolutely nowhere. It really felt like a changing of the guard. Nike, of course, still is, 50 times bigger than Hoka, but you could just see from at a cultural level, Hoka is really going up. I think Nike honestly has kind of lost their mojo. Like I don't see the product innovation happening. I don't see the cultural relevance happening. They're sort of depending on their kind of sneaker culture and Air Jordans, which these new brands don't have sneaker. They weren't making shoes in the 80s like Nike was. And these new brands they're more culturally relevant. And so like in the running space, you have Satisfy Running. There's an incredible YouTube video that they have up that I just think is amazing. If you can look it up, of a guy running to a great track from War on Drugs through LA. Just such a fantastic, like mesmerizing piece. You have Johnji, you have Wazelle, you have Tracksmith has done a great job doing cool content. They just opened a store in London. They've got a store in New York, in Boston. Like what Tracksmith has done a great job. So like they're all these startup brands, and I would put Hoka in there as well. They're very big now. They're over $1 billion in sales. But so I think like a lot of these big brands like Under Armour, I just feel like has kind of like, they're just nowhere.
Really lost its way. Like,
correct.
Yeah.
And so all these bands really like, they need a purpose and they need to stay true to that purpose. So like, and not every brand has to fall out of fashion. Like look at like Patagonia,
right?
And owned by one person, one family for 50 years. They're more relevant than ever. They're so committed to sustainability and the environment in such a powerful way. Their fans would lay down in front of a train for them. And Patagonia is not trying to appeal to everyone, but if you're into the outdoors and into sustainability, that is your brand. There is no other brand.
Right. No, that's a good example that's fascinating. Thank you. All right. So last question in the big topic section here. this is an assumption of mine based on some things you've written, but the local leaders and the political leaders of all places on the planet, Bentonville, Arkansas, must be some of the most entrepreneurial politicians and entrepreneurial local leaders ever, because a city in, I think, northwestern Arkansas that has historically only been known to the outside world because of Walmart is now, according to what you've been sharing for a while now, like essentially reinvented itself as the biking capital of the world. So like what's going on in Bentonville, Arkansas? And then what lessons could we take away from that from a kind of creative entrepreneurial reinvention standpoint?
Right. Okay. Well, great question. Full disclosure, they're clients of mine.
Oh, okay. So first of all, they were smart enough to hire you, so good for them.
They were clients of mine. I was writing articles about it. Okay. And
I suspected that, right?
So, and really, the clients of mine are Tom and Steuart Walton, grandsons of the founder of Walmart, Sam Walton.
Okay.
Tom and Steuart have a business there, kind of a investment vehicle called the Runway Group. Okay. So Tom and Steuart are super, super, super into bikes personally, like more than I am, like super hardcore, really good. So they started building mountain bike trails around the city. And that just kind of grew from a few trails and people with shovels to like, it grew, let's bring a crew in. Can we build like, now they're like over 500 miles of beautiful mountain bike trails. Like imagine, you have to go there and experience it. Like, so yes, it's Northwest Arkansas. It's in the Ozark Mountains near the border of Missouri to the north and Oklahoma to the west.
Right.
Very hilly. So, and very, very nice country. It's the headquarters of Walmart. And so Tom and Steuart started building trails. They're up to over 500 miles of beautiful trails. Like the trails, you have to see it. Like they bring in stonemasons to these beautiful corners. There's amazing signage. It feels like if the nicest ski area in America built a mountain bike park. Like with the great signage, blue, green, black trails, and all the features, the learning area over there, and the bike shops with the coffee in them, and like it's like the whole region has been built around bikes. And Tom and Steuart also, they bought the Rafa brand, which was started in London, but they bought that brand. Okay. They have Allied bicycles, which are made handmade carbon fiber bikes made there. They're investors in Wahoo, a big technology brand, and they have investments in real estate, in hospitality, in aviation, all kinds of things, all started there in Bentonville. And so their mission is to make Northwest Arkansas the best place in the country to live. So everything is sort of filtered through this idea of like, is this going to make it a better place to be here?
Had they liked skiing, maybe there would be ski hills and fake snow. So they liked mountain biking.
Correct.
And it's kind of expanded from there.
Correct. So there are a lot of really, anyway, so it's very exciting to go there. And I remember flying in the first time, I'm thinking to myself, really, I'm in the Ozarks, Bentonville? Really? Like, this is going to be a good area for bikes? And you get on the trails, like, I can't believe how good this is.
That's impressive.
And so it's pretty amazing. I love visiting there. It is Arkansas. So, that part of Arkansas is really like part of the Midwest.
Yeah.
People think of Arkansas as like being part of the South. Like maybe the southern part of the state is like that. That part of the state is not like that.
No, like you said, it's, I mean, I had a prior relationship with someone from Tulsa, right? You could go to Tulsa to up into Missouri or over to Arkansas. And
Correct. So anyway, so I love going there. And I think it is a great example of really creating a place like an international cycling destination that was created from scratch. Like we can keep, it's not like those places had to exist forever. Like you can create those. And so I think a lot about international sports epicenters, like Chamonix, France is one for mountain sports culture. Girona, Spain is one for cycling in Europe.
Okay.
Bentonville is one where it's like a global epicenter where people come from all over the world to do a sport. And it's not only about doing the sport there, it's connecting with the other community, the other tribe members who have come in from parts all over the world.
Right.
And you get it's a tribal connection while you're there. That is as important as the actual sport you're doing.
What I love about that is it's also proof of, I mean, it's always nice to have a couple of Waltons in your pocket, right? But aside from, I mean, let's set them aside as the family and just say money, right? So with resources, but the resources only become useful when someone has the spark of an idea, right?
Correct.
And then the resources are the thing that can enable potentially the craziest of ideas off
Correct.
this from
Correct.
the surface to reality. And I think a lot about that, in advance of our Olympics here, right, coming in 2028, is just kind of
Yeah.
projecting forward and thinking, there's the day-to-day management of a massive complex megalopolis like we are,
Yeah.
that is in and of itself a challenge, but then there's this opportunity, right? There's this, like, what can we do? What can we be that we aren't now? Or what could we add to already what we are? What unique things could we add to it? Almost like features.
Yeah.
And yes, money is of course a huge participant player there, but
Yeah.
it just takes dreamers dreaming,
Correct.
for either their own selfish reasons, like, hey, I want to have more mountain bike trails to ride,
Right.
or for their selfish reasons plus community
Right.
plus, wow, like this would
Right.
be cool to.
Money alone is not enough.
No,
Yeah.
never is, right?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Last question. And I had a couple of choices here. This is the last section of the show. I'd love to
Yep.
make this actionable for everybody, give them something they can take away and
Yep.
apply. The one that I'm going to go with is actually, because I see this kind of across solo entrepreneurs, as you said. I see it across sports from a fandom standpoint, from your writings. I see it in small businesses and entrepreneurship. Experiential marketing, right? This nexus of experiential marketing and the desire to create long-term valuable communities, right? And it starts online, but I think today we seem to live in a world where it's now hybridizing itself, right, in a healthy way, where we live the best of digital technologies in connection with audiences, as well as the best of in real life stuff. So if you had to break down and say, like, what would maybe be 2 or 3 actionable steps that either individual branded athletes, right, or let's just, if you want to widen it out to just entrepreneurs in general, could take to create memorable, impactful stories that translate into greater engagement and deeper community, right? How do we create that experiential magic?
I think that, thank you, Rob. That's a great question. I think and I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I made a video about this a couple weeks ago. I just think it's so important to build community. So here, I'll give you an example, Rob. I go every year. I was just up there last month to the big kind of bicycle. It's kind of a trade show, but kind of an event for tens of thousands of people. There are different races, and it's called the Sea Otter Classic. It's in Monterey at the Laguna Seca Raceway. And I think there were, I don't know, 1,100 bike related brands there this year, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of booths. And what I see is so many brands kind of being run by product and engineering people, which that's mission critical. I'm not dissing them,
Right.
but I just don't see them building community like they should. Like, here's an event that's all about thousands of people coming together.
Right.
There should be, like, every day should be coffee and pizza and beers and events and group rides. And, like, I see so many brands just defaulting to, like, hey, I don't know, we got a tent up and some bikes underneath.
And our bikes are faster, slicker, lighter, whatever.
Correct, which is, everybody says the same thing. So
right.
like so many purchasing decisions are made from an emotional perspective, like, I don't know, 70% or something. Why not make people feel good about your product or your brand by giving them an amazing experience? And that goes, like, I don't care what the product is. It could be B2B, it could be business to consumer, could be an athlete, getting group runs together. Like, so some of these athletes are really good at getting group runs together, who are not even, like, you wouldn't call them like an Olympian or a professional level athlete that way. Like Hella Sidibe in New Jersey, like, he's on a run streak of, like, I think 5 years every day he's run.
Wow.
And he gets big groups together to run, and he
Yeah.
represents Hoka and gets groups together at Hoka events around the country. Same with Kate Glavin in New York City. Like, she maybe runs a 4-hour marathon. She's not fast, but she's on TikTok. She's on Instagram. She's building a relationship. She has a monthly run at the Hoka store. She's getting people out there. So, like, this can happen at any level. It doesn't have to be a consumer brand. And I have just worked on so many consumer brand activations, all kinds of activations. I spent a couple years working with Lululemon on getting them into the LA Run community in, like, 2015, 2016. And we did really big, live events for them. And it was so powerful getting people together is powerful in real life. And like it's not the same on a Zoom call. I know you
Right.
know that. And that brand, like, Lululemon was always genius at getting people together around their retail stores. When I was working at them, they had a lot to learn about the digital side of things, but they were really committed to getting people together in real life for like yoga classes and in their store, whatever it was. And that brand is just like stratospheric right now. Like their growth and their revenue is just on up and to the right every
Yeah.
month. So I just have so much respect for that kind of marketing. And why not make people feel good if you can?
Yeah. Right. No, I mean, that seems, yeah. And I love the universality of that advice. I mean, I think, we have a lot of tug and pull in the current discourse about, office culture, in the office, out of the office, remote, all that stuff. And that all was shifting before the pandemic. It's going to continue to shift. It's just the nature of the fact that we have all these tools. But I think the people I see best at it, or the groups or companies, brands that are best at it, do what you just said, just leverage both, right? So you create a connection or a point of contact digitally, but then bring it locally.
Yeah.
Right? Like take it on the road, so to speak.
That's right. Rob, I'm in contact with so many different CEOs all over the country, all over the world, really. And they've all been struggling with the return to work. Are we hybrid? Are we remote? What are we? And what I see is, I think the hybrid model is going to be what's going to live on. What I see them doing is like sort of 3 days a week in the office. There are some things, working on a spreadsheet or writing, that you just don't need to be in the office for.
Yeah.
On the other hand, try doing a group brainstorm on Zoom versus around one big table. It's not even close to as effective.
Right.
And so when there are certain things when you're all together that are just way, way more efficient and faster and more impactful, if you can get people together in real life, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I often attribute it's leadership, right? I mean, it's the workers are going to do what the workers are going to do. Yeah. But if the organizations that struggle with it, I tend to see, and I'll use your example of that at the Sea Otter Classic, right? So they know we're supposed to show up with a tent and a couple of staffers and the t-shirts. But then there's brands that say, okay, we're here now. We're gonna lead better. We're just better leaders, right? So I could have you in the office 1 day a week or 5 days a week, but if I don't understand how to lead the people that are remote and office and hybrid, like that's on us culturally, right? So that's fascinating. Hey, we could talk for hours. We're not going to. Respect your time. You're a busy man. You got a lot going on. This was terrific. I'm grateful for your energy. Grateful for us to connect this way. I look forward to us hanging out somewhere here in town at some point this year, and taking this to actual friendship. But you helped us understand kind of so much of what's going on in the world of sports as athletes, but also as kind of the business of sport. And ultimately, you are yourself an entrepreneurial thinker in how you approach everything that you do. So I'm really, really grateful that you could spend some time with us today.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Hey, quick, before we go, in case anybody wants to connect with you or the agency or find you or the studio, how do we follow you or find you anywhere you would like us to?
Let's see. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram at the Peter Abraham, and I have a blog on Medium. If you search Peter Abraham on Medium, you can find my blog there.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you. Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.